Good afternoon, Chairman Gregory and members of the Recreation Committee. Thank you for convening today to learn about the status of the Low Country Lowline, to learn how our city and the Friends of the Lowline can strengthen our partnership and our partnership with the citizens of Charleston to address flooding, mobility, and neighborhood security while also creating a fabulous new park, the Lowline. So my name is Scott Parker, and I'm a founding member of the Friends of the Lowline Board. Professionally, I'm a landscape architect and an urban planner with the firm DesignWorks. And our firm worked with the city of Charleston, specifically Mayor Tecklenburg and department heads Jacob Lindsay, Keith Benjamin, Jason Kronsberg, and most importantly, Alan Davis. Most of them are here today from the Design Center to reveal the opportunities that the Lowline presents for our city. So a little background. The Friends of the Lowline was formed 8 years ago with the vision of two great friends of Charleston, Mike Messner and Tom Bradford, to transform an abandoned rail line into a park. To date, the board, now totaling 12 citizens, has invested over $3 million in privately raised money into the Lowline. Ours is a grassroots effort by Charlestonians for Charlestonians. The corridor is now owned by the city. Today, with this meeting this afternoon, we begin our public outreach. We've crafted an opportunity plan for the Lowline to help citizens provide input into how the Lowline can serve them and how it can enhance their lives. So let's begin. So I'm going to take you through the plan right now. So the first slide answers the question, what is the Lowline? And the words that we have here, we've chosen very carefully. So I want to read this, if you'll indulge me. So the Lowline is public infrastructure enhancing the lives of all the citizens of Charleston. The Lowline is the central spine of a regional park and mobility system connecting downtown to West Ashley, to North Charleston, and to Mount Pleasant. The Lowline is transforming an abandoned rail corridor and neglected highway corridor into a place supporting and expressing the 8 surrounding neighborhoods and districts. The Lowline is maximizing the storage and treatment of stormwater, helping to address citywide flooding. The Lowline is a continuous green corridor enhancing biodiversity and providing places for active and passive recreation, and the Lowline is unique to Charleston. So in working on this opportunity plan, we established some core principles, all based around the idea of resilience. So from the standpoint of social resilience, it's all about giving people the opportunity to choose alternate modes of transportation and to safely engage in them. It's about encouraging social gathering and interaction, and it's about being inclusive to all people, to all the citizens of Charleston. From the standpoint of environmental resilience, which is really dealing with flooding and stormwater, it's about embracing stormwater and learning how to store it sustainably. It's about strengthening the ecological functions of the peninsula and promoting health and wellness for humans as well as nature. Cultural resilience is about being true to Charleston, being authentic to Charleston, a place that expresses who we are and what our values are. And economic resilience is about being self-sustaining, about creating a park that can pay for itself, so that we're not strapping the taxpayers with a huge burden to take care of and maintain this place. So to begin, just like our downtown is the core of our entire region, we see the Lowline also as the core of a larger mobility and park system that connects to Mount Pleasant over the Cooper River Bridge, connects to North Charleston along King and Meeting Streets, and with the new bridge across the Ashley River, connects to Ashley River and the greenway and bikeway that is there. So it's much more than just the central piece of the peninsula. The low line will take its place among the other parks that exist on the peninsula today. And we have a lot of wonderful parks, but when you think of a city our size, it'll be wonderful to have a new park to add into this repertoire. In looking at the peninsula itself, the low line really travels through or is found within the core of the city. The area bounded by Meeting Street to the east, King Street to the west. It's the area of our city that has the highest density of uses. It has our greatest mix of uses. And it's surrounded by and touches on 8 different neighborhoods. Most of the times when you think of parks in our city, there's really one neighborhood around it. The low line is unique in that it touches so many, and it has the opportunity to bring these neighborhoods together. So this is what we're calling our conceptual plan, and it's really an opportunity plan. So when we go out to the public, what we want to do is present opportunities for them. These are things that the low line can do to enhance your life. These are things that the low line can do to make your neighborhood better. And which of these opportunities do you want to embrace? And maybe there's some that you say, no, we don't want to do that. But the idea is to present these as opportunities and get their feedback. So when we drew the plan, rather than just drawing the corridor, we drew all of the neighborhoods around it, because it's really about those neighborhoods. It's about the people that live there, the people that work there, the people that shop there. So we're really thinking about it as ways of lifting these areas up, ways of strengthening these neighborhoods, ways of improving the lifestyle for the people that live there. When we started the low line, we really were thinking about utilizing just the abandoned Norfolk Southern rail line. And we spent a lot of time and money acquiring that property, and it's now owned by the city. One of the things that city leaders in the past did that was extremely wise was they entered into a lease agreement with SCDOT for all of the property under the elevated I-26. And in that lease agreement, which runs in perpetuity, the city is allowed to have recreational opportunities. They're allowed to have paths that move through there. They're allowed to store stormwater. So what we want to do is take advantage of that lease agreement, take advantage of that vision from the past, and integrate it into a larger vision for the entire low line. When we think of the low line, we sort of have divided into sections. So we call the urban core the southernmost portion really from Line Street or the Septima Clark Parkway down to Marion Square. Then the section in the center we call the 2 parks, which would include a new park at Poinsett Park, which is where the old rail lines are, up to another new park, which we're calling Newmarket Park. And it gets its name because of an existing saltwater creek that touches there called Newmarket Creek. And then we have an area called the Columns, and it's named that because there's so many columns there that are holding up the elevated highway. And at the northernmost part, we have our transit hub and gateway. And that's where King Street, Meeting Street, and I-26 come together. And it's also where a new major transit stop will occur as part of the Low Country Rapid Transit line. So it's truly a gateway to the city. So now I want to go through some of the components or some of the opportunities that the low line presents for the city. So the first one is to talk about water. So it's safe to say that flooding is a big issue for our city, and the low line offers some real opportunities. First, I want to show the map on the left, which is called an elevation map. So the colors that are orange and red and yellow mean higher elevations. The colors that are green and blue mean lower elevations. So the low line generally falls in one of the highest parts of the peninsula. And that's really where King Street is. So when King Street came into the city in the early days, it followed the highest land. And generally, water drains from that high spine, if you will, to the Cooper River and to the Ashley River. And it drains through those neighborhoods on its way to those waterways. Now, the city, and wisely, has made significant investments over the last 20 years in flooding. And you can see it's approximately or north of $225 million to make improvements in these drainage basins. So each time you see one of those outlines, that represents a different drainage basin that exists in the city. So a drainage basin means all of the water that lands within that area is contained there and then flows out into the rivers from those drainage basins. So one of the big challenges for our city is that we have so many different drainage basins. And so you make improvements in one, it's really just addressing that one drainage basin. You can see with the low line, it actually touches 6 different drainage basins. So we have opportunities to improve drainage in each one of those drainage basins. So just as a way of representing that, the drawing on the top is simply showing the elevated highway and the streets that exist within that corridor between Meeting Street and King Street. And so those are impervious, so water that falls there cannot drain in to the ground. There's lots of other impervious surfaces there as well, so there's rooftops and parking lots and other things. But I'm just showing you the amount of impervious roadways that are there. The drawing on the bottom shows the open space that exists within this corridor. One of the things we learned in the Dutch dialogues was that storing water is incredibly important to help the city address flooding. And a primary place to store water is in public space, so our parks and our streets. And so the low line, as represented here, equals 40 acres. So we have 40 acres of open space that we can utilize for water storage. So it's a real opportunity. Now, I mentioned our Newmarket Park, which is located right there. So when we think about stormwater, we want to store it, but we also want to be concerned about water quality. And what we mean about that is how clean the water is. So right now, a lot of the water in the city falls on the roads, it picks up pollutants, and it drains into the Cooper River or it drains into the Ashley River. So all of those pollutants are simply going out into the waterways. So what we're looking at doing with Newmarket Park is taking advantage of that big open space that is there and creating a new wetland. And this wetland can be used to store water. The other advantage of it is the wetland vegetation can be used to clean the water, to filter out impurities. And then the other advantage of it is because of Newmarket Creek, we can then channel the water directly into the Cooper River once it's been cleaned. That all sounds wonderful. The other real advantage to that is that all of the water can be directed to this point and brought out to the Cooper River. So it means it's not going through those drainage ways in the neighborhoods on either side of the corridor. So what we're doing is we're opening up capacity in those neighborhoods, those lower lying neighborhoods on either side of us. So by making these improvements in the corridor, we're dramatically helping those existing neighborhoods on either side of us. So there's a real opportunity with the low line to help our city address flooding. These next diagrams talk about as we design those public spaces under there and in those park spaces, we should design them so that they can be flooded. And when the water goes away, they can still become functioning parks. So that's how we can help with water. The next category that's an opportunity for the low line deals with mobility, how people move around our city. And one of the things that we all know that's happening right now is the Low Country Rapid Transit. And the routing of that line is in planning right now. And they're considering a number of different routes through the peninsula. And in thinking about where it should go and in working with the city staff, what we're suggesting is that the preferred route would really be to use Meeting Street. So to come down, land at the transit hub, come down Meeting Street, connect to Calhoun, and then either head south or head to the medical district. And then those dots represent places where a transit stop would be. So those transit stops are located close to the low line. So the low line, providing places for bikes and people on foot, can connect directly into those transit stops. One of the things in the funding for the rapid transit line, is station improvements. So what that means is they're going to make a station or a stop, but they're also going to make improvements to the roadways that connect to it. So we can leverage that investment to make great connections from those stops to the low line and vice versa. Another thing that the city's doing extremely well is the People Pedal Plan. And there's been a lot of folks that have been focused on this. And the low line can become an integral part of that and help transform the way people move around the city so that we're not always dependent on being in an automobile. The next thing that we're talking about is how should the movement through the corridor be configured? And we've made recommendations about the width of the bikeway and that should be separated from the pedestrian movement. We've also thought about where it should occur within the larger corridor. And what I mean by that is originally we always imagined it being right on top of the rail line. But now that we're able to think about the larger area under the elevated I-26, we're thinking we have opportunities to potentially move some of those movement corridors under the elevated highway and take advantage of the open space closer to the neighborhoods and actually turn that into park space or community gardens or gathering spaces that really help those neighborhoods and provide a wonderful amenity for them. Another key aspect is what's called a mid-block crossing. So what that means is when the bike path intersects with a street, we want to give priority to the people on foot and on bike and actually stop the cars. Next section is on planting. So we're a park. So it's a real opportunity to bring plants and greenery and gardens into to the heart of the city. And we all know what that means for people and how it nurtures people and nurtures their lives. And so we thought about how those parks might look. So in the urban core, we're thinking that perhaps they're more traditional, like Charleston alleys. And then as we moving north where we have larger spaces, we're thinking more traditional parks like Hampton Park, or this is the Waterfront Park in Mount Pleasant, or even Bryant Park in New York. And then we have the big wetland park that serves the role of filtering the water. And I want to go back to that for a minute because this is a real important point. When you invest in infrastructure, in the best way of doing that, you're not only addressing the need of the infrastructure. What I mean by that, for example, is addressing flooding, but you're also at the same time creating an amenity. So you're leveraging that investment to not only address flooding, but to create something that is attractive to people. It enhances their lives on multiple levels. The next area is about programming. So what should happen here? And we've really sort of thought about this in thinking about the different areas of the low line. So in the urban core, close to Marion Square, between King and Meeting Streets, we're really thinking of it as, shopping and outdoor dining, as well as a movement corridor. So you imagine this sort of wonderful network of pedestrian spaces with the low line running down the center and not having cars there, and what that can mean for our city. So you can have that experience without the cars zipping by. In the center, where we have our larger park spaces, we're thinking there could be places for larger events. There could be places for pets, for recreation, for active recreation, for passive recreation. I'm going to tell a little story. When we think about our parks, one of the things that oftentimes people want to do is they want to be able to eat and drink and go to the bathroom. And so as we're thinking about the parks here, we're really thinking about those opportunities. Because this park doesn't exist today, we can have those program elements become a part of the park on day one and really become something that serves our citizens on multiple levels. As we move to the north, similar ideas. Under the columns, there's lots of things that could happen. Playgrounds, there could be places for outdoor dining, places for markets. So I'm going to show you just a couple of very quick images, and then I'm going to wrap up. So in the urban core, I'm going to go over So here's a picture looking south from Line Street towards Columbus Street. So this is the loading dock of the Evening Post where they print the newspapers. This is a new apartment building called the Guild, and that's the low-line space, and it measures about 50 feet across. So that's what it looks like today, and that's what it might look like in the future. So again, these are not final plans by any means. These are simply opportunities that could happen. So here you see the introduction of a concession stand so that folks moving through there could have the opportunity to get refreshments. As we move north towards Poinsett Park, which is located right there, that's what it looks like today. So this is the old rail yard. So there were multiple railroad tracks in this location. So again, looking south, that's the Septima Clark elevated highway. We're coming off of I-26. And an example of what it might look like. So again, a larger gathering space. Again, potential for concessions. And you see folks moving on bikes, folks moving on foot, and active recreation that could occur there. Moving north even more. So here's a picture. This is the elevated I-26. This is Ensign Homes on your left. That's where the rail line used to be. And this is an image of what it could be. So again, you see the 2 lanes of bikes going in opposite directions, separated from the pedestrian traffic, places to sit, wonderful vegetation, perhaps using the elevated highway for art installations. Moving even further north to the area that we call the Columns, and you can see why we call it that. And then an image of, this happens to be a market that might occur, perhaps on a weekly level or once a month or something. Again, where folks can come together, support local businesses, et cetera. So it really takes us to next steps. And so our big next step is public engagement. So as I mentioned, today is really the kickoff of that. And so we're going to go out and meet with the neighbors and meet with as many people as possible. Let them see what the opportunities are and hear how they respond to those opportunities. Everybody talks about funding. You know, how are we going to pay for this? And so we've looked at other places that have done this type of thing. And an example close by is in Atlanta, where they built the Beltline. And they really had 3 major funding tranches. So one was people donating money. So literally 1/3 of the funding of the Beltline was from private donations. And we've already seen with the low line here that that works. People are willing to give money to this. They see what it can mean to the city. They also have there something like a business improvement district or a municipal improvement district, which is a self-taxing district. And we actually are beginning to think about that and have a study underway to look at doing something like that to help with the low-line funding. And then the last is federal, state, and local grants. So being able to tie in things like infrastructure, especially stormwater infrastructure or mobility infrastructure, can help us get grants to help build this and leverage that money to create this eventual park space. So I'm going to conclude and say this. As you can see, the opportunities for Charleston with the low line are profound.